Hey DCC, welcome to another edition of Morning Coffee. I don't know if you grew up in the 80s or not and you remember Carl Lewis as an Olympic runner. But I grew up with, Carl Lewis was this guy who like dominated all these different things. He had like long jump, he was a sprinter, he ran in relay teams. There was just kind of all these things that Carl Lewis did, and he was kind of like untouchable, and he surpassed so many people, right? And he's like the fastest man on earth for a while and stuff like that. But I remember these vivid images of Olympics and Olympic trials where there's kind of that relay race, right? In a relay race, they have to hand off the baton, and you'd see them kind of go around and they're kind of hanging with the pack, and then all of a sudden, Carl Lewis would get the handoff, and all of a sudden he's just tearing around the track, and he's just creating distance, and he kind of pulls away from everybody else and finishes. And so one of the things that I wanted to think about as we think about the idea of handing the baton is a lot of times in life, if we'll just allow God to control the circumstances and we're just ready to do what we need to do, what God calls us into, and let Him take care of the results, we'll be amazed at some of the results. And so let me give you that in another illustration. I have this friend named Drew, and Drew's a professor now today. And if you listen to Drew, you would think, man alive, this guy is super smart, brilliant, creative. He's a scholar, he's a philosopher, he's all these things, right? And if you listen to him today or you read one of his books, you'd think, yeah, I mean, man, that guy is just super talented. But let me give you a little bit of Drew's past. Drew grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He didn't go to church. His idea of church was very Bible belty and kind of cheesy, Jesus kind of thing. But he never went to church, and so he found his dad left in middle school, and he didn't grow up with a father for the rest of that time. He had skinhead, I think, tattooed in Old English on his back in big letters before he even entered his freshman year of high school. He tried 3 times as a freshman to do the high school thing, and eventually had to drop out because they wouldn't accept him, and he just flunked out of school 3 times and then eventually just stopped going to high school. So he's a skinhead, he's rebellious, he isn't going to school, and he doesn't know what to do. So eventually he starts talking to some people, and they thought, well, maybe military is the answer. And so he goes in the United States Army. And Drew says, when he tells his story, that just made him a better drinker. He was a more professional drinker, taught him how to do everything that he was doing before, even better. Except none of those things were great, right? And so the Army wasn't an easy fix for any of his problems or issues either. But he said that there was this guy that he came across when he was active duty and he was on the front lines that kind of saved his life a couple times. And he said that guy had this huge amount of influence over him, and he respected him, and he looked up to him. And one day that guy, that soldier, shared about Jesus with him. And it was just a really simple thing. But to Drew, it just clicked. And he said it was like in one 24-hour period, he went from kind of seeing everything in black and white to seeing everything in color. And that God all of a sudden took this individual that he respected, and he changed his life. And just that one opportunity. So here's this guy who has earned the respect of a fellow soldier, and he takes the opportunity just to talk to him about how Jesus is important to him. Nothing fancy. He didn't take him through scriptures and take him through any certain path or share, a specific way, But this impacted Drew and changed his life, and Drew became a Christian. And so I think one of the things that is interesting about Drew's life is that Drew then started asking questions and started really kind of reading the Bible and doing a number of things. And so his friend felt like, good grief, like I don't even have all those answers. I believe in Jesus, but I don't know all this stuff. You should go to seminary. And Drew's kind of like, what the hell is seminary? And so Drew's, his buddy goes, well, that's a place where they sit there and they talk about things that you like to talk about. And so Drew goes into school, and he says like the first 2 years that he's there, he doesn't understand anything that the professors are talking about. He doesn't even understand the questions that his fellow students are asking, right? And then the second 2 years that he was going to school, he didn't even really get most of it. He only got just about maybe 10%. But interestingly enough, he kept learning and he kept pursuing and he kept going. And then now today, he's got a PhD and he teaches Bible and kind of how we can, he teaches incoming freshmen how to know the difference between a belief and an opinion. And so here's this guy who is impacting students every day of his life. He's an accomplished author. If you heard Drew today, you would never know that he didn't, grow up with a dad. You wouldn't know that he was a skinhead. Wouldn't know that he dropped out of high school 3 times. You wouldn't know that, he had done, all these different things that really kind of weren't great, right? They were kind of horrific. And yet, Drew now has his impact. And it brings me back to that story of Carl Lewis. A lot of times we'll just be open to the opportunity of sharing what we know, our simple faith, just a belief, just caring for somebody, listening to somebody, just being able to take advantage of an opportunity that God puts in front of us instead of being lazy, instead of falling back, instead of not, risking something. You'll be amazed at who you hand the baton off to. That U.S. soldier who shared the gospel and just shared a simple story about how he believed in Jesus, with Drew, probably never guessed that Drew would turn into a professor that's teaching people the Bible every year, right? And all these students coming in, hundreds and hundreds of students every year. But he was willing to do his part and hand the baton to Drew, and then Drew just took off like Carl Lewis and is now going gangbusters. I think that's the amazing thing about what God can do. If we'll just put our faith and trust in God and let him take care of the results and just be willing to do those little things, right? So this week, when a coworker needs you, or your daughter or son, or your wife, or anyone just needs you to listen or to maybe share a few words, or you just want to talk about, what Jesus means in your life, or look at some of the things that in ways in which you can help somebody or impact somebody, and start to just take those opportunities, those little opportunities that God gives you, because man, you could be talking to somebody that when you hand the baton off to them, they take off and have something where God uses their life in this very, very special, awesome way, and you are a part of that. So don't ever underestimate yourself, right? Drew could have underestimated himself and thought, man, I'm never gonna amount to anything. Look at this. I don't know how to understand anything that these guys talk about, but he just kept applying himself and learning. That U.S. soldier who shared the gospel with him could have said, hey, you know what? Like, I don't want to create a controversy. This guy, I have to be in the barracks with this guy all the time. I don't want him to think I'm weird or a wacko or something. So he didn't share. But instead, he risked a little bit. He reached out a little bit and he took advantage of that opportunity. And then it changed somebody's life who's now changing the lives of hundreds of people every year. So let God take care of the results. Let God do the amazing things. And just be open to those little opportunities that each day gives you, okay? Because you never know who you're handing that baton off to. Okay? Have a good day.